And thank you for joining us here on PM Express on this Monday. This is just 24 hours, less than that, before Parliament resumes for its second meeting in this very important part of our democratic dispensation where Parliament, for the very first time, is split down the middle. And tonight I am excited, looking forward to a conversation with one of the most difficult people to find, to sit down and chat with. He's the minority leader, Harun Idrisu, and he's agreed to sit down for a conversation because there's a lot happening in this country that I want to pick his brain on, both in Parliament and outside Parliament. I want to go through the list for you. There's a lot, so bear with me as we look at some of the key issues that we'll be going through for you. There's a whole list of them that we're going to be looking at today. And I want to look at this. I mean, I'm pretty sure you've been talking a lot about some of these key things, right? The national security lapses that has been a key major topic the last, 1 week. There's a fight against galamsey. Then there's the current state of Ghana's economy in the wake of COVID. I mean, so we'll talk about that. We have the special prosecutor who the office is going to get a new boss. I wonder what his thoughts are on that also. Then there's the salary freezes and the size of government in this COVID-19 era. Remember that May Day was just a few weeks away, well, days. We know that conversations are underway about minimum wage. Why is that important? He was a former labor minister, so I want to pick his brain on that key point there. I mean, we are almost mid-year. We still don't know what the minimum wage is. We'll get his thoughts on that. Now, we'll come to Parliament's oversight. That's where his domain is, his comfort zone. We'll ask him a few questions about that. The minority role in keeping government in check. We'll come to that. But there's a few major controversial issues that we'll get him to address to. And so we are dividing this into two parts. There's a first part in which we will look at all these, the economy, then, and the second part will focus on his domain, that is Parliament a bit, the party, the NDC, and you see some of the faces that I go through here for you. But remember that this conversation is being had, the timing is appropriate because Parliament resumes tomorrow, and there are a few things that we expect will happen, right? If you haven't checked it, we expect the passing of 5 bills, according to a statement that was issued this tonight by Parliament itself. Consumer Protection Bill, Petroleum Revenue Management Amendment Bill will all come before the House for it to be examined. Then there'll be vetting. Vetting of the deputy ministerial nominees is important. And there's, of course, I've talked about the special prosecutor getting a nominee who's also going to go there. I'll ask him his thoughts on this. But there are some controversial matters also that you've seen play out in Parliament also. The situation report of the Lands and Natural Resources Minister will come before them. We know the Appointments Committee is shot by one person. That's the gentleman there, Samuel Kuditu Ablakwa, a good friend of mine also. So have they replaced him? What will happen there? And of course, the minority itself had had issues, right, about, many concerns over the last meeting that will get him to comment on. I mean, he had been very emphatic in the statement he issued that the minority will do all it can to hold the MPP government accountable. This was in the wake of some of the, concerns was raised by people like Sami Jemfi, who was very unhappy with the way the leadership in the House has handled a lot of the issues. I mean, he was very emphatic that, people had sold their conscience. This, many say water under the bridge, but half the party in Parliament closed their ranks. Have they closed their ranks? Have the bridges been mended over the last break that they were on? And we will also look at the caucus in the Parliament. We will not, as you say, the minority leader himself was emphatic in making the point that we will not disappoint you in the future. I mean, that is a commitment that a leader has made. He talked about himself being in charge. The caucus has never been and would never be for sale. It's something that he says. How has that gone down well with the grassroots? Because it all revolved around some of these 3 ministers it started with, right? I mean, Kojo Pong, Nkrumah, Hawa Kumsing, and then the Greek minister. They went through after the minority guys had said, well, let's put him on hold. And then the big one came with the finance minister himself, who also went through, right? I mean, so he got through with bipartisan support. And many said, well, why is that on the floor of Parliament? Then we'll come to all these. So there's a lot to go through for you tonight when Harun Idrisu sits with me tonight to have a conversation. A conversation about everything Ghana, Parliament, the party himself. You don't want to miss this because we're going to be focusing a lot on his views also about the country. There are many things happening in Ghana that I want to pick his brain on. You don't often get to sit with him. So when you do, you need to make sure you exhaust it. I promise this is going to be exciting. Stay with us. And thank you very much for joining us here on PM Express. As I have previously advertised at the top of the hour, my guest is Haruna Idrisu. He is the leader of the minority in the House. That's the minority leader. And I recall very well in January, we were all struggling with, should we call him minority leader or leader of the minority? And eventually all that was settled. And so I'm happy that he joins us. Thank you very much, Haruna Idrisu.
You can say leader of the NDC caucus.
Leader of the NDC caucus in Parliament, with, exactly.
Equal number of 137 parliamentary seats. And there are huge expectations of me as minority leader and of the caucus to endeavor to hold President Nana Addo Dankwa and his government accountable to the Ghanaian people, and to endeavor to ensure that he works to improve the lot of the Ghanaian, and he works to improve the quality of life of the Ghanaian. It appears to me as at today that he probably is sleeping on the job. You don't have boards and corporations even having chief executive officers. Boards have not been constituted. That's a mark of bad governance. You don't leave this to ministerial actions and ministerial decisions. It's not for nothing that every other entity runs as this important governance structure having a board.
This is on 4 months into his administration.
He has just 3.5 years left into the pinnacle of his career. Is the second term. He's not serving his first term.
Most governments have the same challenge, right?
He ought to have been better prepared under his second term. And probably in terms of economic management and economic governance, no pride. There is nothing that we can be proud of except the parallel numbers that they are sharing with us. And as you did your intro, I was smiling because many Ghanaians were disappointed in me personally and in the minority, justifiably, over the approval and disapproval of ministers. We've whistled that away, and we are determined to remain focused. I primarily will provide essential leadership that is purposeful and meaningful in holding this government accountable. So just tolerate that as one of the...
And you touch on something that will come to... you want to stay with us?
Because judgment. I'm happy to deal with any of it along the line.
As I indicated, I mean, this bit that he's touched on, we'll come to that in detail in the second half of this conversation. But tomorrow, you're back in the
Parliament
House.
Resumes tomorrow. The business committee will, as usual, meet to determine the business of the House. I had some consultations with the Speaker. I was out of town briefly and engaged, and he was waiting to have details of what we would be doing. But you can guess a few issues. We expect what government considers important legislation to be brought to the House. I know there's some work on an affirmative action bill. Whether that will be accompanied by the spousal rights bill, I'm unable to speak to it. But it tells you that as a parliament, we've slept on ensuring that the constitutionally guaranteed spousal rights thing, guaranteed under the Constitution, has not been given meaning to. Affirmative action, President Mills did his best. Excellency John Mahama improved upon it. Nana Addo Dankwa, I'm not too sure until the legislation comes. They'll be able to count the number of females who are occupying important public positions in order to bridge an affirmative gap. So essentially, I know that Ghanaians were unhappy, some justifiably, some just for purposes of undermine. Internal party wrangling and internal adversity should not affect the provision of leadership. And I'm determined to provide whatever leadership I can. It is not just about NDC. Businesses that are failing will look up to the political minority. We made President John Dramani Mahama substantial votes. 6 million Ghanaians voted for him. Simply reverse it. It means 6 million people were already not happy with Nana Addo Dankwa and his governance. That's half of what probably he got, save the Electoral Commission coming to his aid. As we honestly believe it, we think that is an election we ought to have won. You know what happened with the parliamentary seats of our numbers reducing through excesses of the security agencies. Unacceptable. And I just think that the president will have to repurpose the presidency. Boards and corporations not in place. decentralization system have come to a halt.
Well, they are
if not
currently vetting
acquired.
people.
So who is acting in those capacities?
Let's
those
start.
are matters that are important and urgent.
Yeah.
That a serious president must be attending to them.
Let's come
4 or 5 months.
That is
getting to his.
One of the things that you'll be doing shortly is also playing a part in that. The vetting, etc. We'll come to that. Let's start one of the biggest conversations happening in the last 2 weeks. It's around the economy, and this has reflected in this Fix the Country protest that had taken this country by storm. I wonder. You sit back and you watched all that. Do you have any sympathies for this government? Because this is a we were saying the COVID. This is an economy affected by COVID. No fault of this government. If you were in power, you probably have the same challenge. I mean, have you been in government before? Do you have any sympathy for the government in the wake of these protests that we've seen social media almost translating onto the streets?
Fix the country and save the country. I would even add that we need to save the country from efforts at state capture, wanting to take control of every state institution, and wanting to direct affairs that pleases some other personal interests and not just the public interest or our national good. I think that rightly, if I were President Nana Addo Dankwa, I would declare a Ghana beyond COVID and not Ghana beyond aid.
Why?
One, he has 3.5 years journey. That journey cannot attain a Ghana beyond aid. When he himself runs to the European Investment Bank to borrow a 170 million euro to set up a development bank. For what? What has happened to ADB? What has happened to NIB? Can't you recapitalize them? Can't you refocus their mandate and vision to deliver? They have people in employment. NIB is near collapse. ADB near collapse. You could even borrow money to save 7 banks that have collapsed, 23 savings and loans institutions, over 220 microfinance entities. Why didn't government borrow to save those jobs and save those savings and spend a whooping 23 billion and turn around to borrow? Don't forget, the banks engaged President Nana Addo Dankwa, which was captured by the Daily Graphic. I'll share with you. At that time, some of them needed between 400 to 500 million for purposes of recapitalization. They simply were turned away and denied. So Nana Addo Dankwa is supervising an economy or a country that, pardon my word, is at the precipice of a multiple crisis.
Is it?
An economic crisis, a COVID crisis, and an energy doomsday crisis.
But the international donor committee disagrees with you on the development bank.
Which donor?
They have founded a vehicle worthy enough to invest it.
Which donor?
And give. He went to Europe.
Foreign direct investment in Ghana have always increased in the last decade. Don't forget, I've been Minister for Trade and Industry. We've all traveled the world to make Ghana attractive, an investment-friendly destination. FDI have always increased every other year. You can check the record. Last 10 years, even when he was not president of the republic. But let me make my point. I said multiple crises. An economic crisis because if you understand, I hope you listen to the World Bank, you listen to the IMF, you listen to Fitch and Moody. This is the highest fiscal deficit ever recorded in Ghana's history of 15.5%. National COVID debt, don't worry, are you the only COVID country? Other countries too had COVID. Are they recording the same fiscal deficit? We suspended the Fiscal Responsibility Act for good purpose. When you don't discipline your expenditure and run fast on profligate spending, you are likely to get this. But you must be worried because, one, the Minister for Finance is sharing parallel numbers. Different numbers with Parliament, different numbers with the IMF. How come that today the deficit is 15.5%? When he came to Parliament, he reported 11.9%. Now take even national debt. You are talking about Nana Addo Dankwa, who inherited from President John Dramani Mahama and the NDC 122 or 120.3 billion as total public debt. Today, by their parallel figures, they give 291. The IMF now says 298.6 because they are adding the energy sector debt. So within this short period of 3.5 years, and Evans, anybody can govern this country if you can borrow as much. Over 160 billion added to our national debt. 160. What do we have to show for it?
No, but we have a lot.
Wait.
I want to quote you the IMF. I want to quote you the IMF. You quote the IMF. I want to quote you the IMF.
The same IMF.
The IMF on the 15th of May, 2 weeks ago, said, I want to quote you. This is according to the Reuters. After the conclusion of the country's mission, it says Ghana has managed this COVID-19 outbreak very effectively.
Yes.
And its economy is rebounding with the support of its strong policies. That is an endorsement of government policy.
Rebounding?
Yes. That is a quote from the IMF.
No, read well. I listened even to join you.
That is a direct quote from the IMF.
And I have given you my references. Fitch and Moody have warned.
But this is a quote from the IMF.
About fiscal consolidation, about Ghana watching its public debt. How much are we using to service debt? You have, for instance, no. I'll share.
It's an endorsement of the government's policies.
You can endorse
leading to a rebound of the economy.
Go to the street and let ordinary Ghanaians tell you that the Ghanaian economy is doing well.
But you're quoting the IMF. You're rejecting this finding.
No. And I said, read extensively what the IMF and the World Bank published. The 15.5% is not my number. The fact that he misled Parliament into a different deficit and debt number is not emanating from me. It's all in the same IMF report. And I'm saying that the Ghanaian economy is simply not doing well. Contractors remain unpaid. There are people who have certificates standing from 2016, 17, 18.
But that has always been the case. Even under your government, contractors remain unpaid.
No. Watch how there were disbursements from Road Fund and others. And probably, if you just took a minute, this is the only economy today, superior economic management. You listen to Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia and Ken Ofori-Atta. That I've even heard Ken Ofori-Atta say that we should be interested in looking at how much each government have borrowed in percentage terms. That's deceptive economics. He must be sharing with the Ghanaian people how much he spends to service debt. If it's 5.3% of GDP, that is higher than what existed probably at end of 2016, and he must be concerned about that. What percentage of that is total revenue? He must be concerned about that. But even more importantly, when you say he's doing well in economic rebound, which policy? All the receivables have been mortgaged. You have an economy where today, Get Fund has 1.5 billion of some loan of a sort. You have, for instance, even Ghana Exim, which was set up by the NDC and President Mahama to improve export financing. Ordinarily, no good economist worth of any standing will borrow against
you talk about policies. The IMF isolates the policies.
I'm coming to policy, don't worry.
But that's what you're talking about. It says policy interventions in 2020. Again, policy interventions in 2020 were also critical to safeguard livelihoods and pave the way for a faster rebound of economic activity. Real GDP growth is projected at 4.8. It goes on. The CARES program has the potential to be transformative and inclusive for the Ghanaian economy, buttressed by its emphasis. Let me finish. Buttressed by its emphasis on SMEs and digitalization, as well as leveraging the AFTA. This is the IMF applauding government policy for helping to have what it calls faster rebound of economic activity.
You are listening to yourself. The CARE program, how is it going to be funded? With the rate of your public debt, tell me.
They said 70% private.
How is it going to be funded?
I'm just quoting what was in the budget.
Sector.
70% private, 30% government.
You think when you have debt ballooning, private sector is interested in investing in that economy? Which economies are you talking about? I'm simply saying that we are at the precipice of some multiple crises. Let's not make pretensions about it. All is not well with the Ghanaian economy. We simply are broke. And when you hear IMF talk about Care or Batampa program, look at it. It spans a longer period than the tenure of President Nana Akufo-Addo. And even, let me come back to that. What Ken Ofori-Atta has cleverly done is to defer and postpone debt that he ought to have paid in the last 4 years to 2025 and beyond.
Smart borrowing.
When he would not be in office. So don't call that you are being clever. And
but isn't that what your government calls smart borrowing?
No. I'm not talking about borrowing.
Reprofiling your debt structure.
So in refinancing, then he praises himself. I've done well. And a postponement of your burden does not deserve praise. And I'm simply saying that he ought to have serviced those debts. What he has done is just a postponement. Take, for instance, Bank of Ghana. Recall that I was part of the team that President Mahama sent to negotiate the IMF deal. There was 0% financing from the Bank of Ghana. Ken Ofori-Atta, as Minister of Finance, comes to Parliament to say that he wants to borrow 10 billion Ghana cedis from the Bank of Ghana. The Bank of Ghana Act provides that even borrowing, financing from the Bank of Ghana shall not exceed a certain percentage of the total revenue of the previous year, granted that they met that requirement. We are told that today the Bank of Ghana financed the Ministry of Finance to 22 billion and beyond. That is breach of the law. And that is not financial, any good.
What percentage? Because the law says more than 5%.
And I said they have exceeded their percentage. The percentage is what they came to Parliament for approval. I'm aware that the Bank of Ghana has financed government not less than 22
Mr. Drisley, you are the leader of the minority in Parliament. If they have breached the law, you have the powers of Parliament to deal with that.
That is why I'm here for us to discuss it, so that you know that they are praising themselves whilst hiding numbers from Parliament and from the public. Because as far as Parliament is concerned, they came to borrow only 10 billion. Now the numbers have soared, 22 billion and still counting. There's even a local bank I'm currently probing to know how much obligations they have with the government of Ghana.
As in the exposure to government.
Absolutely. And you want to be interested in whether that has been added to our public debt or not. So all is not well. We need an economic redemption. And I'm saying that let them let them listen well to the IMF. I'm not Fitch, I'm not Moody.
In what form will this redemption
How come that
take?
they have downgraded the economy? Even to account for COVID resources. We've had some difficulties and challenges. As minority, like you said, we've been asking for it. In Parliament, we said that simply audit your COVID expenditure. Because as far as we are concerned, much of the COVID resources was used for purposes of over abuse and exploitation of incumbency.
But you haven't proven that. I've heard you say this before, but without proof.
Good. How can I prove it? I don't have a mandate of audit.
Because I heard you actually say you are probing this.
Yes,
but if you're probing it, you must come with the evidence.
That is why the Constitution provides independent institutions to do that.
You can file a petition at the...
You are quoting World Bank and IMF.
Yeah.
They refuse to listen to the minority. Now they have listened to World Bank and IMF and have agreed to a COVID audit only because the money emanated from them. But what they must know is that it's the taxpayers' money which is used to service the money we borrow from them.
So you can file a complaint, which are complaint. Are the right institutions to investigate
I'm here with you. I'm expressing my disappointment that when we said that subject COVID expenditure to an open, transparent audit for Ghanaians to appreciate what went where, for what purpose, were denied in silence until they said they and IMF and World Bank, because there was some investigation of a sort that they now want to establish it. Now, when you go through that, and that reminds me, you have again Nana Akufo-Addo and his presidency. You know what's happening at the airport, this $150 which has now come to 50 Frontier Health Services, and the excuse is that under COVID, they didn't have to go through procurement process. Is it only Ghana which has COVID? The other countries which is undertaking it, didn't they go through procurement? Are you asking for suspension of our laws? You ousted the Ghanaian procurement laws just to self-serve a business friend. That is wrong. And that is unacceptable.
That's an allegation you made there.
It's not an allegation.
Business friend.
I'm saying that...
Who is this business friend?
I'm saying that it did not go through due process. It did not go through legitimate, respected.
You're almost suggesting nepotism here. I'm not afraid to use that word. We want to know who owns that business.
Why couldn't Noguchi conduct that exercise?
I mean,
why couldn't the Kumasi Center of
the health minister exercise? Came before the committee that you were a member of.
Yes.
You asked him these questions.
Yes.
And you still approved his nomination.
Yes. You see, good. I'll come to explain parliamentary nomination for you. You see, you are mixing content issues with minimum legitimate requirements of law. Read Article 94 of the 1992 Constitution well. It says the basis of what makes a person qualify to be member of parliament. It further says the basis of what makes a person qualified to be minister of state. If you have any constitutional breach, share it with me. We probe. And as we probe, we are looking for many of them who may be found wanting to meet the minimum constitutional thresholds. Then you move to criminal threshold, whether or not you have evidence. It's not just a matter of saying that Evans have done this wrong. Do you have material facts to support it? I'll give you an interesting example. I know a foreign embassy which related to me about a nominee involved in visa racketeering. I've formally written to the embassy. Up till yesterday, they have not responded. But the same embassy a few years ago said that, Haruna, I want to share with you MPs who are involved in visa racketeering. I just simply cannot allege. I must go beyond it to establish prima facie evidence as my basis. I don't have it. In many situations, I can take individual by individual cases when we get there. But I'm simply saying that, yes, we fell short of public expectations. We fell short of the expectations of the NDC party following. But we did not necessarily fall short of the requirement of the law.
I want to take a quick break shortly because, but before I do, I need to exhaust this part of before I come to the rest of the issues in Parliament, etc. Labour. You were formerly a Labour minister. And I'm interested in this because just 2 weeks ago, we celebrated May Day. There's still a lot of conversations around minimum wage conversations. We are almost in the middle of the year. Is this standard practice? You were there that, agreement hasn't been reached, etc. going forward, nobody?
You know, sometimes governance is a continuum. President Nana Addo Dankwa must appreciate the NDC and President Mahama and many of us for bringing the insidious labor conflict to an end. It had to do with Tier 2 pensions that I basically resolved as Minister for Employment. Now, if you look at public sector wage negotiations, I had set a new standard recognized by the same World Bank. Tomorrow I'll share a World Bank report on it for you that conclude minimum wage, conclude public sector-based wage negotiations before budget. So 2014, 2015, 2016, I worked very closely with them, Minister Setekpe, to achieve that. And I say the World Bank recognizes because then it allowed the Minister of Finance to plan effectively and to project ahead, particularly of the compensation budget of Ghana, which was worrying as a percentage of revenue and as a percentage of GDP. We managed to resolve many of those issues, including what I call a signature credit given health workers, their fair, certified, codified conditions of service. I got them signed on to it. So if you see some stability in the labor front, don't take absolute credit as if it's only the doing of President Nana Addo Dankwa and his Minister for Labor. The foundations were laid. Now, it struck me as Minister for Employment when the budget was presented on behalf of the President, there was no text on an adjustment in the compensation allocation. So if you recall, it was one of the immediate issues I brought to fore.
True.
So it meant that this government anticipates that they don't want to increase wages for this.
Is that a standard practice? You budget for it, then you go and negotiate?
You know, they are very interesting. You went to the economists, blame COVID, profit from COVID. Now you understand why I made that statement. Where the economy is in difficulty, blame COVID. Where the economy has inflicted hardships, tax the people for purpose of rebounding the economy. It doesn't work that way. So it means that when you hear President Nana Addo Dankwa, and I heard you on Joy News dealing with it, says that there is a freeze of increases for persons in the executive. How many are people in the executive? Is it not the same Nana Akufo-Addo who ran the largest size of government in Ghana's fourth Republican history.
But that would definitely make a difference.
No.
It won't?
No, in 2020, he lived with COVID and could have downsized government. He didn't do it until this time. So don't hide. That's what I call...
But keeping them honest, your government also adopted similar measures in hard times. And John Mahama took advance pay cuts that all government appointees had to take. Didn't you do so?
I say in governing a country, go beyond symbolic pretensions. Cut expenditure.
Was it symbolic pretensions when John Mahama did it too?
No, and I'm saying that what meaning does that make? You see, you must get a labor economist to give you the numbers. That's woefully insignificant.
So what do you expect, broadly?
And I say that's woefully insignificant. They are expecting labor to make some sacrifices. Initially, when you started this interview, you wanted to know whether I have sympathy. I'm sympathetic on that.
Okay.
That can labor, appreciating the consequence of COVID, give in somehow, but the same labor is coming under increases in utility prices, water and electricity. So they would use that to justify that you necessarily must give them an increment. But probably what government can do in a post-COVID environment is to negotiate towards what we did, COLA, cost of living allowance. Whether labor will accept it, I'm unable to predict it. But it is wrong for government to assume every other year, as I was Minister for Labor, you peg it at naturally at inflation rate. So labor will be expecting 10, 11, 12% increases. I wish that I could recognize somebody publicly. I don't know if he wants me to do that.
Who?
The president of the Ghana Employers Association.
Why are you recognizing him?
There are people in the quiet who help in the development and growth of this country and economy on the quiet. Terry Darko, I believe, at the time. And then even minimum wage. You know, even Ghanaians, we consider minimum wage with public sector wage. Minimum wage affects just the private sector, not the public sector. For public sector, you must have base pay negotiation. But minimum wage is to allow private sector entities to peg incomes and earnings not below a certain expectation. Ghana is not there. The world is now debating decent wages. You don't even have the minimum wage. I'm talking of a decent.
Do you expect an increase across the board in the negotiation that the tripartite committee is knowing what you know?
I don't
having
know.
Been there before?
I don't know what is going on at the tripartite, but what I do know is that the leadership of Labour can be very reasonable. I've recently read, and today as I walk into my office in Parliament, I got a communication from CLOSAC who are raising questions as to who should be the supervising minister for pensions, whether it should be the Minister of Finance or it should be the Minister for Labour. For all intents and purposes, I had the privilege and honor under President Mahama to supervise pensions. So the National Pension Regulatory Authority was under my watch as Minister for Labour. Naturally, because of the huge burdens that came with Tier 2 pension and appreciating how much from 3.2 billion, which was in a temporary pension fund account with the Bank of Ghana, ought to have been utilized and the investment. So even as we are discussing government debt, this Minister for Finance is silent, dead silent, on how much he owes in respect of pensions. Probe it. You are a journalist, be interested in it. So when you say your economy is well, it's like they come into Parliament and say Ajapa. It simply means you are taking your wife gold ring to go and sell. And you say you are a very good husband. They should hail you as a husband.
I want to take a quick break. When I return, we will look at the Special Prosecutor nomination. We'll look at Parliament, his domain. We'll talk about the national security conversation that has engulfed this country. We'll get his thoughts on the party itself that he belongs to. You want to stay with us because I know you'll be interested in what he says. I mean, he was accused a lot. Some say he was he assaulted his conscience. I wonder how he felt in the midst of all that accusations, because he's a human being. I know he has a thick skin. Did it get to him at all? Stay with me. And my guest in the studio is still Haruna Idrisu. He is the minority leader. Mr. Idrisu, let's go to your domain for a second in Parliament. I mean, under your leadership, I mean, the minority, some say, was battered with controversies that left the grassroots unhappy, some of your own members breaking ranks. Have you closed ranks now as you go back for the second meeting?
Absolutely, and I'm encouraged that the NDC party leadership and its council of elders and the minority caucus have engaged for us to appreciate what they consider their dissatisfaction or what they consider as appalling performance of leadership and members of parliament. And it's limited for the purpose of this parliament to the approval and disapproval of ministers. That I understand. But if you know of any other issue, share with me. So we are united in focus. We are united in meaning to hold government accountable. What I appreciated in my engagement with grassroots party members, which is one of the lessons I've learned as minority leader, is to tell you in your face, Haruna, what we expected you to do, even if you are losing, lose in honor and dignity.
Did you lose in honor and dignity?
In some situations, there was no honor or dignity.
Which ones?
When you have 137 and you go and get any number below 137 for the NDC party following, that is disappointing. It means that you are not able to hold together. I take responsibility for that. But Evans, it will go down in history and record, like it or not, that Haruna Idrisu, one of my iconic achievements as minority leader, is to have produced a speaker in Alban Bagbin. I said it at his, when we met in Sombo to celebrate him. I said that history, at least will remember that I had the rare privilege and opportunity to propose him, and God's grace, he was accepted.
You proposed him?
Yes.
Oh, you
as
did?
Speaker, I did. Go back to the record. And he won. Now, study what people are not appreciating enough. The nuances of parliament, chamber dynamics. How did I get Bagbin elected? How did we, as a minority caucus, I should thank my leadership, Donald Muntaka, Veji Ahmed, and Doyo, and the entire, how did we do it? It is because we are successful to the extent that there is cooperation from the other side. We are successful to the extent that there is cooperation from the other side. Where you are unable to woo that support, that emanates in disappointment and the controversies that you are talking about. So in one breath, hail Haruna, praise Haruna. He's gotten a speaker elected from his side with that miracle of 137 plus some other votes. Then the same adults go into approval of ministers of Hawa Kumsin, Kojo Opon, Nkrumah, and a Greek minister. And then it turns that some members of the NDC flip to the other side. So in respect of Bagbin, there was a flip favorable to me, and approval of ministers, a flip disfavorable to me. Only people who want to approbate and reprobate will not appreciate the dynamics of what we are going through.
Did
so
you
get it right.
Was there failure on your part there to get your members to do what obviously you wish?
You know, maybe let me explain it further. How did we get Bagbin elected? We insisted and protected the sanctity of the secret ballot process. It's the same secret ballot process that gave birth to what we have been condemned for.
Some of your own let you down then.
I can only leave it there, but was I to follow those adults to the voting room to determine?
Did you feel let down?
Disappointed.
By those who voted?
What I considered unacceptable was people trying to impugn my integrity.
They say you took bribes and you were sold out. Were you?
You know, I teasingly said that I won't be buried with money, and therefore I'm controlled the extent to which I have appetite for that. And two, I shared this with somebody. My mother is still alive. If I spend 1,000 Ghana cedis before her, I have to account for it. Where is it from? What purpose? You have to. It is not a matter of compromise relating to money. It had to do with other considerations and affiliations that members in their own wisdom felt obliged to associate. Nothing like that.
But how to explain?
Look, for instance, that day you saw me seated. How could I be the one going to... but I issued my instructions to the whip that I want a no vote. But I just didn't get a no vote because I could have gotten it if I insisted on the whip system, a three-line whip. But don't forget, we were against that principle when it came to election of speaker. And for me, having Bagbin as speaker is the greatest thing that could have happened to the NDC at this material time in our political history.
But how do you explain?
Not because of the fact that he would be firm and fair, he would be impartial and neutral. He understands the dynamics and workings of Parliament, and he would leave a mark. I promise you, the Honorable Sumana Bagbin will leave a mark as Speaker of Parliament to lead meaningful reforms, to make Parliament more transparent and accountable. You are talking about oversight. In truth, Ghana's Parliament is found wanting when it comes to its oversight function. You can't take 1 week, 2 weeks to review a budget and say you are exercising oversight. You cannot take when members ask questions and they are not even allowed and accommodated for follow-up questions. Then you say parliamentary oversight is being strengthened. When members make statements, there is no follow-up to those actions, whether it's specific. For instance, take Galamsey. When I hear the spirited effort of President Nana Akufo-Addo and his team that they are fighting Galamsey and they will be successful. His fight against Galamsey suffered a failure the very day Aisha Wang was repatriated, and were told then by Senior Minister Osafo Mafo that jail was not important, so burning excavators is important. I mean, their actions are preposterous to the rule of law, repugnant to natural justice. You just can't do that in a lawful civilized state. What's happening in this country? That you think that if people disagree with any conduct or action of individuals, they should go burning?
Mr. Bruce, your government also banned excavators.
And I'm saying that is not right. We must follow due process. You can follow due process to do that. I'll be interested in knowing, but in the eye of the public, I mean, I remember what happened in Dalong. I don't have the vivid examples under my colleague, the Honorable Inusa Fuseni, but we are not a lawless state. There are laws in Ghana. In any case, who gives out those mining licenses? Who gave out those licenses for people to mine in forest reserves? Let's hold them responsible. I mean, you cannot. And then in Ghana, it's like excavators are seized and missing. Now you are burning, so goats can go missing. Is that the kind of country you look up to? I mean, I think that the president is damaging his public reputation.
Is it a view that you held then too when under John Mahama this was happening? Is it a principal view that you're having?
In any case, whatever is not this scale is an experience in our country's history. Be fair to John Mahama. I'm not aware that excavators have been burned at this scale. Okay. Not ever in our country's history.
But one excavator burned, if you refer to the law,
I say I don't have the details, but I say that it is wrong. I don't find that acceptable. I don't find that acceptable.
Let me give you an opportunity to respond to this. I mean, the finance minister's approval. I think that is what a watershed moment. In fact, one of your own told us that the Friday after the vetting, the conclusion was that you were going to give conditional approval, only for them to return to the House on Monday, and then they realized that you had signed off on the consensus. Is that what happened?
Approval of ministers is done after the vetting process. But this time around, for some reason, in respect of Ken Ofori-Atta, I think that is the process we went through. After we went through his vetting, I recall that he was not too well, so there was some sympathy in terms of his health. But arguably, what I recall was when you say conditional to what?
On the documents.
I can share what I know with you, and you can go back to the Parliamentary Hansard, which will vindicate me. So before his approval, you would have noticed that the Honorable Arnaud Dompre rose to move the motion. I asked him, no, you cannot proceed with this motion because I'm further engaging with the majority leader for the Minister for Finance designate to respond to those conditional issues. Go to the Hansard. That's why Parliament is a house of record. So how could you say that we didn't demand that?
But in the end,
no, wait a minute.
You stood on your feet.
Wait a minute.
You seconded the motion.
No, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I'm the ranking member of the Appointments Committee. So yes, in respect of Ken Ofori-Atta, the minority isolated 3 issues that we needed urgent and immediate satisfactory responses to. 1, the Mackenzie contract, which is another fraudulent contract. Why would you bring in South Africans to be running GRA and running Ministry of Finance for $1.8 million a month? Those are the kind of expenditure we should discipline, not freezing people's salary as ministers. So we demanded some details on the Mackenzie contract with GRA. And I simply just cannot understand why Mackenzie should be engaged. I mean, Ghanaian tax experts are capable of doing what they are doing. Then 2, one of our colleagues strongly raised that we needed reconciliation to understand the Public Interest Accountability PIAC report of an outstanding 20, I may not get a figure right because I don't have the document here, of some unexplained amount that PIAC wants it accounted for. I can show you a copy of a formal correspondence from the Ministry of Finance responding to that. Indeed, to quote the letter, even though I don't have it here, we're told that 7th of April, there will be engagement between the Ministry of Finance and PIAC to have an understanding to work on those issues. The 3rd issue we requested for was recruitment into the Ministry of Finance, because we hear family and friends where even public and civil servants at the ministry are not finding their feet. So we needed to understand how some of them got into the ministry. There is official communication to me prior to his approval that
So you were happy with the responses you got?
No, I'm not done yet. Then I, additionally, as minority leader, normally when the report is done, myself and the chairman will co-edit it, even though it's largely a function of chairman. But because Parliament is a transparent institution, I get to see the report. Then I insisted that I needed to know how much Bank of Ghana financed government. The very question you wanted me, this is how I could get that material evidence. So officially, all those documents were formally brought to me, satisfying that condition. Now, what you need to know is, are there material constitutional issues? Are there material criminal fraud issues? Are there material moral turpitude issues that I can hold him to? At that point in time, I didn't have enough weight of whatever information that I had. So we had agreed in consultation with the leadership that he probably, I mean, given our example, and then maybe, Evans, let me share this interesting experience with you. And that's why I say that you must understand chamber dynamics to take some of the flag that we take. If you recall, even the day that we took the voting on the other ministers, for the first time in Parliament's history, we had to vote on a motion whether Parliament should continue sitting or not. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Now, when we voted, the MPP were more than the NDC in the chamber. You appreciate that? So if you study chamber dynamics, it meant that at that time, the MPP were sure that they had the numbers to get.
And if you moved this, you would have lost.
Absolutely. Okay. And 2, they are just looking for 50% of those voting, satisfying that condition. Get it right. So it is not even just getting number. If you get 50% of the vote, then nominally you pass for approval. In any case, I am not the appointing authority, and I don't have a duty to approve.
Let me ask you, as we wrap up,
good ministers for President.
Let me ask you as a wrap up. I mean, have you forgiven Sammy Gyamfi?
For what?
I mean, for saying you betrayed the party, you lost your conscience, those strong words. Have you forgiven him?
I have been national youth organizer of the party. I just didn't become minority leader. I've been member of Parliament for Tamale South. It's a seat that I hold strongly and dear, and I'll continue to preserve and protect it for the NDC, even if I decide to whistle out in the foreseeable future. But to say that I bear no grudge in my heart against any person, and I don't go to bed. You've heard a lot of people talk a lot about Haruna, some abuses and insults. Mine is that time, a better judge and a fairer.
Have you replaced Okujuta Blackwell on a committee? On a
replace him? You know, that's why I say you must understand the dynamics and workings of Parliament. Under Article 103(4) of the 1992 Constitution, every member of Parliament must necessarily belong to a standing committee. It is the only standing committee that Honorable Ablakwa belongs to, is the Appointments Committee. To take him off it now, you will be in breach of the Constitution.
But he's resigned.
No, to take him off now, I'm saying he necessarily must belong to a standing committee and a select committee. We will work out. I'm waiting for the Speaker to minute back to me whatever his decision and advice is, and we'll do what is appropriate. There are capable men and women within the NDC Minority Caucus who can play the role the Honorable Ablakwa played at the Appointments Committee. I would have wished that he didn't act that way, but once he said that it was personal to him, someday, trust me, I will share more of my own experience as to many of these issues which went to vetting and approval. Don't forget, I've been minister for 8 years, and I think that I have to wait for somebody to sell fish to give me money. For what?
Mr. Idrisu, I'm grateful that you joined me. There's a lot of food for thought that you've given us. That we wish you well in this meeting. So
Bank of Ghana will have to account to the Ghanaian people how much they finance government. They must take the minority serious. I would fire a formal correspondence to them. I'm happy engaging with you. What I do know is that the minority is united. I bear nobody any grudge. I've paid my dues to the party. I've worked very hard as his youth organizer, setting up the structures and organs of the party. I feel very proud of it. There are many of them, if you reflect Parliament, many of them, Haruna inspired them to come to Parliament. If they reflect well, they would know, and they will appreciate Haruna Idrisu.
Mr. Idrisu, I'm grateful.
Many.
Thank you very much for coming,
Evan.
and all the best in this new meeting.
Bless you, thanks.
Enjoy the rest of the evening.